All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely high-stakes psychology of emergency response. We're going to uncover what really keeps firefighters alive when literally everything around them is falling apart. We'll dive into the hidden mechanisms of critical incident stress and see exactly how elite sports psychology frameworks are being used to protect the very people who protect our communities.
So when you see a fire engine speed past, sirens absolutely blaring, heading toward a disaster, you probably assume their survival comes down entirely to physical bravery, right? We naturally picture them running headfirst into burning buildings, swinging axes, and breaking down doors. But here's the reality. Succeeding in that kind of totally unpredictable, chaotic environment demands absolute psychological resilience. Surviving those flames, it's not just about muscle and grit, it's fundamentally about the mind.
Section 1. More than just muscle. Let's look past the whole Hollywood myth of physical invincibility and examine the hidden psychological demands of the job.
Now, obviously, firefighting takes extraordinary physical prowess, but it also places this massive cognitive and emotional burden on these folks. Depending on the call, they're constantly having to execute highly complex medical and rescue protocols. And remember, they aren't doing this in some bright, sterile hospital room. They're navigating blinding, toxic fumes and literally zero visibility. Trying to manage all that critical information while enduring extreme heat and intense physical strain, that is an absolutely exhausting task for the human brain.
Which brings us to Section 2, the psychological toll. Let's see how this intense burden actually impacts the brain and body over time.
Did you know that every single year in the U.S., 17.7 out of every 100 firefighters incur an injury on the job? Think about that for a second. That's nearly 1 in 5 every single year. It's a staggering statistic. And researchers have found that this alarming rate isn't just because, fires are hot and buildings unexpectedly collapse. There's actually a much deeper psychological mechanism at play dictating how they perform. You see, that high injury rate is deeply linked to collective stress and what researchers call critical incidents. Basically, a critical incident is any event that causes significant human distress and is severe enough to completely overwhelm your normal ability to cope. Firefighters face these terrifying events constantly, and it directly leads to mental health concerns and, crucially, suboptimal performance on the job. We're talking about hesitating for a split second when a split second is literally all you have. Internally, dealing with this extreme trauma constantly throws the brain's limbic system, our primal fight-or-flight center, into absolute overdrive. When that system gets overloaded, you get immediate tunnel vision and a loss of fine motor skills, all because your survival instincts are totally hijacking your rational thought. If this neurobiological stress goes untreated over the long term, it puts these professionals at massive risk for severe compassion fatigue and total psychological burnout. But the danger isn't just long-term. It has real, immediate consequences on the ground.
The real kicker here is that a perceived lack of emotional control right in the middle of an emergency dramatically spikes a first responder's chance of making a fatal mental error. We're talking about critical misjudgments, like missing a really subtle sign that a roof is about to cave in, or miscalculating the amount of oxygen left in a tank. In a life-or-death situation, a mental error doesn't just mean losing a game or missing a point. It can mean losing a life.
Let me ask you this directly. Put yourself in their heavy boots for just a second. Imagine trying to communicate with a distressed, totally incoherent victim while you're wearing 75 pounds of heavy gear in a 500-degree room. You're completely in the dark, listening to the harsh, isolating sound of your own breathing apparatus. Would your brain freeze up, or would you know exactly how to regulate your emotions? Imagining that kind of intense sensory overload really drives home the point. Managing your mind is just as critical as managing the fire itself.
And that leads us to Section 3, the tactical athlete solution. To survive and thrive in these extreme conditions, we've got to shift our perspective and start treating them as elite tactical athletes.
Think about it like this. Just like elite Olympic competitors training for a gold medal, these tactical athletes can drastically benefit from psychological skills training, or PST. We aren't just talking about basic stress relief here. This is a comprehensive cognitive behavioral framework designed to build a totally bulletproof performance mindset. By using things like advanced stress inoculation and cognitive reframing, PST actually prevents burnout and helps them sustain complex execution under immense chaotic pressure.
But here's where it gets really fascinating, because firefighters operate totally differently from traditional athletes. In normal sports psychology, performers usually master the basic skills first, things like taking a moment for deep breathing or mental imagery, before moving on to the advanced stuff. But clinical studies show that firefighters, because of their unforgiving environment, actually score way higher in advanced emotional regulation and rapid activation than they do in basic relaxation techniques. They simply don't have the time for the basics.
I mean, the simple, kind of humorous truth of the matter is, you can't exactly ask a raging house fire to take a 5-minute timeout so you can go find a quiet corner and practice your visualization exercises. They are operating in this hyper-compressed environment that demands instant, advanced emotional control without the luxury of any basic prep.
Section 4. Training the hero's mind. Because of this harsh life-and-death reality, firefighters instinctively develop elite emotional control just to survive the job. But relying purely on trial and error is super dangerous and can lead to some really hidden, unhealthy coping mechanisms down the line.
So, by actively bringing psychological skills training right into the firehouses, we give them a highly structured timeline of care. First, it equips them with the exact tools to proactively cope with daily operational stress. Second, it helps them mentally prepare for chaotic emergencies way before the alarm ever actually sounds. And finally, it provides a vital, healthy framework to effectively process trauma after a critical incident occurs. It basically removes all that dangerous guesswork from their mental survival.
When we train their minds with the exact same rigor, focus, and funding that we use to train their physical bodies, we achieve something incredible. We don't just enhance their tactical performance on the fireground, we actively protect their lives and safeguard their long-term mental health. Honestly, we owe it to them to treat their minds as their most vital piece of protective gear.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to consider. If absolute psychological resilience is what truly keeps a firefighter alive, are we doing enough to equip our first responders with the mental armor they need to survive the calls we never see? Think deeply about how we truly support the tactical athletes protecting our communities. Thank you so much for joining me for this breakdown, and keep questioning what it takes to perform at the absolute highest levels.